Okay, we're about to get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Macedonia, Director of the Department of Environmental Protection. We are here today to let the public know that we've been informed of elevated levels of PFAS in a stormwater pond and nearby stream running along the south side of Great Seneca Highway and beneath Key West Avenue. PFAS, or PFAS, is the acronym for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. That's a mouthful. That's why we say PFAS. These substances are often called forever chemicals. They do not break down in the environment and they accumulate over time. Although PFAS has been used in everyday products for decades, the extent of health risks were not widely understood until recently. And the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency established the first national drinking water standards for PFAS in 2024. I want to start by saying that our public drinking water is safe, and you will hear more about that shortly. In fact, this discovery was initiated by WSSC Water after screening found traces of PFAS in Muddy Branch watershed. Upon this finding, WSSC Water turned to the Maryland Department of Environment requesting further sampling of Muddy Branch. The state's testing detected high levels of PFAS in an area on and adjacent to the site of the county's former public safety training facility. While there will be more investigation, there are reasons to suspect a source may be the PFAS that manufacturers intentionally added to the firefighting foam known as Class B aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF. This PFAS-containing foam was previously used on the former Training Academy site from the 1970s through 2015. PFAS-containing foam is no longer used by the county and has since been banned in Maryland. The highest level of PFAS was detected near the Training Academy site in a stormwater pond at a concentration of 1,600 parts per trillion. Elevated levels were also found in a stream that flows to the stormwater pond. The pond and stream are marked on a map that we'll be sharing, shown in yellow and red hatchings. For now, it's over there, but you'll also find it on our website, and we'll talk more about that. Additionally, we have some information showing that the Maryland Department of Environment found PFAS in other areas of Muddy Branch, but at a significantly lower level, less than 10 parts per trillion. What do these PFAS levels mean? So the federal government does not have safety standards for PFAS in stream water, which is what this is, like it does for drinking water. And because people don't typically drink untreated stream water, the drinking water standard provides some context, but is not directly applicable to streams and ponds. For reference, the maximum level for PFAS in drinking water is 4 parts per trillion. That's comparable to approximately 1 drop of water in 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So, out of an abundance of caution, we are alerting the public today, and as you will hear, issuing an advisory. Today, you're going to hear from the county executive on how we are advising the public and the steps we are taking to both investigate and respond. You will also hear from our county health officer on the public health advisory, and you will hear from WSSC Water to assure the public that our public drinking water is safe. Moving forward, we will be conducting additional testing, including groundwater, surface water, and soil in the impacted areas to better understand the extent of PFAS contamination. We know that the public will have many questions, And while we might not have all of the answers right away, we will be looking into them and getting back to you. We aren't doing this alone. We have formed a task force that includes the Maryland Department of Environment, our county, and regional partners. With more on how we are responding and informing the public, I'd now like to turn to our County Executive, Mark Elrich.
So thank you, Jennifer, and hello, everyone. I wanted everyone to know that the county is taking this issue and the concern very seriously, and it's taking steps to inform the public and protect public health and the environment. So I'll talk a little bit how we're responding. We're working with the Maryland Department of the Environment to identify the extent and locations of the contamination. As Jennifer noted, we'll be conducting additional sampling, including groundwater and soil. And as we collect data and continue our investigation, the science-based evidence we gather is going to guide our future actions. As we collect data and continue the investigation, science-based evidence is going to be the key to what we do next. Our county health department has issued a health advisory for the specific area of Muddy Branch located in the western portion of the county. You'll hear directly from our county health officer, Dr. Keisha Davis, with more details about the health advisory in a minute. To get the word out, we're posting alerts and signs in the impacted areas. We're going door to door, notifying residents and businesses near the area where we find the highest sample results. And we're contacting well owners within 1 mile of the high sample areas and are offering to test their wells for PFAS. We want to emphasize the state of Maryland guidance for all private well owners is to test their water annually, including for PFAS. We're also hosting a series of community meetings, in person and virtual, starting this Wednesday, June 17th, at the Fife Elementary School at 7 p.m. As Jennifer mentioned, we've created a task force with county, state, and other partners. Together, they will advise the county as we gather data on the extent of risks to the health and the environment. They're going to develop and implement strategies to reduce and remove these risks, and we're going to keep the community informed of health precautions. Importantly, we want you to know the county is taking legal action against the companies that make PFAS, because we know that PFAS is harmful to our health and environment. In May of 2023, the county filed a lawsuit against 24 PFAS manufacturers, expecting that areas within the county are contaminated with PFAS. I can say, parenthetically, that there was, in the Ag Reserve, there was discovery of PFAS in wells, and of course nobody could figure out what the source of the PFAS are, and I think that's what people are finding a lot. This stuff is ubiquitous, and it's not always easy to figure out where it came from, but it's there now. The suit accuses the companies of profiting from PFAS while hiding the known risks, and it seeks to hold these companies accountable for the required remediation. This is the start of a long road of investigating and understanding the impact of PFAS on public health and the environment. We want everyone to know that our county is here working to test, alert the public, and hold makers of these chemicals accountable. I know Dr. Davis will talk about more about drinking water, but drinking water is not affected by, if you're using city water or WSSC water, it's not affected by groundwater at this point. So you don't have to worry about that right now. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I want to speak directly to the residents regarding the ongoing environmental investigation in the county. Recently, Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection notified our health team that elevated levels of PFAS chemicals were detected in water samples taken from a pond near the Muddy Branch stream. Because transparency is our priority, I am here to explain exactly what these chemicals are, what the true health risks are, and the clear steps we are taking to help protect the community. First, let's talk about what PFAS are. As was mentioned earlier, per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS or PFAS, are human-made synthetic compounds that have been used in industry and consumer products since the 1940s. They are found in everyday products to resist heat, water, and grease, things like nonstick cookware, waterproof clothing, and specialized firefighting foams. Because they have a chemical bond that does not break down easily in nature or in our bodies, they are often referred to as forever chemicals. Although PFAS are now found in almost all environments, the levels detected at the sample locations shown on the map, MB8 and 9, are substantially higher than those observed in other natural environments. There's a lot of understandable anxiety when a chemical is found in a local waterway, and so I want to ground our risk in actual science. First, I want to reassure everybody that public drinking water is completely safe. WSSC has been proactively testing for PFAS, and drinking water has remained in full compliance with federal safety standards. The primary risk from PFAS is through ingestion. Health risks associated from PFAS come from swallowing the compound. This happens primarily from drinking contaminated water over a long period of time or by eating fish caught from contaminated waters. The data also shows that PFAS are not easily absorbed through the skin. However, we recommend avoiding contact with the water until we determine if there are other pollutants present, as well as to avoid accidental ingestion. The risk from PFAS is not caused from a single glass of water, a weekend swim, or an accidental splash. The health risks are tied to chronic exposure, meaning drinking contaminated water or eating contaminated fish every day for years, which allows the chemical to gradually accumulate in the body's tissues. As was mentioned, sorry, lost my pages here. Public tap water remains safe. Again, WSSC has fully complied with the recommendations. Sorry, get my notes together here. We are also recommending testing for nearby well owners to rule out the risk of local groundwater contamination. The county is proactively contacting private well owners in the vicinity of the highest sample results to offer free testing of well water. In addition, MDE recommends that all private well owners, regardless of where you live or how close or far you are from the site, should have their wells tested at least once a year to ensure safety, and advises annual PFAS testing. General guidance can be found on MDE's Be Well and Wise campaign. I want to reiterate that the risks from PFAS over time include increased risk for some cancers, cholesterol changes, impacts to immunity, especially for children related to vaccines. Again, that comes from impact over time. And the advisory is to do not consume fish from the waters. I want to remind folks that cleaning or cooking fish does not remove the risk of PFAS. It still remains in the tissues, so we do not advise consuming fish from these waters. We also advise avoiding wading in, swimming in, or playing in the area. Again, mostly to prevent accidental ingestion, but we just want folks to stay away from that area for now. In addition, we recommend that people not allow their pets to drink from the stream or play in the water. Pets have an increased risk because they may get in the water, you can't stop them from drinking it, and then if it gets on their fur, they may lick that and ingest it in that way. So again, we appreciate the partnership and task force in working with DEP, Maryland Department of the Environment, and WSSC continuing to explore this area, and we just are looking out for everyone's health in the matter. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to ask Laura O'Donnell from WSSC to speak.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm Laura O'Donnell, WSSC Water's PFAS Program Manager. We appreciate the leadership of Montgomery County and state partners, as well as the strong regional coordination underway to investigate and address PFAS in the environment. First and foremost, I want our WSSC water customers in Montgomery and Prince George's counties to know that the water we provide is safe. This is not a public water supply issue. The public alert being discussed today water in a stormwater pond and streams. not treated drinking water. The water we expertly produce at the Potomac and Patuxent water filtration plants remains in compliance with all federal Safe Drinking Water Act standards. Since 2020, WSSC Water has been proactively testing for PFAS compounds on a quarterly basis at both the Potomac and the Patuxent water filtration plants. This testing began years before the federal PFAS regulations were finalized and reflects our commitment to transparency and staying ahead of emerging contaminants. Our monitoring data shows that the water we provide our 1.9 million customers meets all U.S. Environmental Protection Agency standards. Addressing PFAS requires collaboration across jurisdictions and agencies, and we are committed to working closely with all partners to protect our region's water supply. We invite you to review our quarterly PFAS test results in detail. You will find them at wsscwater.com/PFAS. Protecting public health is our top priority, and WSSC Water remains committed to continuing our 108-year track record of water quality excellence. Thank you for the opportunity to clearly state that the water provided by WSSC Water is safe and not part of this public alert.
So I want to thank the county executive, Dr. Davis, and Ms. O'Donnell for their expertise and partnership. Having a coordinated team effort is crucial to identifying the extent and location of PFAS contamination and an appropriate course of action going forward. Alerting the public is also important, and the county executive mentioned a series of community meetings that we will be holding. The first will be located at Dufeith Elementary School on Wednesday, June 17th at 7 p.m. That's this Wednesday. That's in North Potomac. We encourage anyone who is interested or impacted by this announcement to please attend. We also have information on that community meeting, on the testing, on the advisory, the contamination, maps, and frequently asked questions on our website. That is montgomerycountymd.gov/PFAS. Residents will also be able to sign up for text and email alerts. So if you go to that website, you'll see a link to sign up for those alerts. I appreciate your attention, and at this point, we will take some questions from the press. Yes?
I was just wondering, do you have like a general estimate of how many folks are on well water in the immediate area affected here?
So we have been investigating the wells within a mile of the location. We think there are less than 5, but we are going to those locations today and knocking on doors to make sure we know whether they are connected to public water or private wells, and offering to test for PFAS. Yes.
Where exactly was the previous training site? Is that where that new development is with those new townhomes and houses?
Yes, it's at the corner between Great Seneca Highway and Key West Avenue.
Okay, are there any requirements for new developers to come in and check for these sort of things, because that whole area has now been redeveloped?
Yes, so the county, when it demolished the site, did environmental safety testing at the site as required. At the time, PFAS was not a part of those requirements. However, the developer has indicated that they also tested for PFAS a bit later. So we're looking into that a bit further, and we intend to do additional soil sampling.
They tested and found, did they say anything about the results, or they said they tested?
They indicated that there were not concerns.
Can someone sort of quantify the risk, right? You know, it's one drop in 20 Olympic swimming pools, 1,600 parts, it's like a third of a cup. You know, what really would have to happen for there to be a health impact on a human being?
I'm going to turn to Dr. Davis.
So that drinking water standard of 4 parts per trillion, which was mentioned, is a very small amount. And that drinking water standard was set on if somebody were to consume 2 liters of water with that concentration of PFAS every day for 70 years, they might see increased health risk. So again, the exposure to PFAS is something that really happens over a long period of time with repeated exposure. As was mentioned, we don't expect that people are drinking that amount of untreated stream water, and the drinking water continues to be safe and has been under that 4 parts per trillion. So in an abundance of caution, we are asking people to stay out of that area so that you don't have accidental ingestion and you're not, we don't want people to have any exposure. But the exposure really does happen over a long period of time. The risk happens over a long period of time.
There's a cul-de-sac that ends backing right up to the pond. What do you say to the people in that community right now that are going to see this and think something, feel something about their kids, whatever?
I say stay out of the pond till we have more information. If you're drinking water, I would encourage folks to drink water. There's not a concern there in terms of the drinking water. But for now, I would say stay out of this pond.
I think you said the muddy branch there. You tested in the muddy branch, correct? And is it just in that area? Because the muddy branch goes all the way down to Penfield Lock and into the river. And people put their kayaks in there. Is that something to be concerned about?
So as mentioned, when WSSC initially noticed elevated levels, they asked the Maryland Department of Environment to do additional testing. And actually, if you don't mind, I might refer to this map here, which we will also have on our website. I know it's small, but there are green triangles indicating where the testing was done. And then the table behind Dr. Davis shows the levels. And for reference, as I mentioned earlier, the highest level was at 1,600 parts per trillion in that stormwater pond, which on this map is MB8. Nearby at MB9 were also high levels. Other areas of the stream were significantly lower. There's a sort of a whole category of PFAS, but of these results, you'll notice they are below 10 parts per trillion in other parts of the stream.
And then my follow-up is, and I think I've heard this right, but I'm sure you'll correct me. If it was tested around the time that the training center was demolished and it wasn't a problem, how is it all of a sudden a problem now?
So that's one of the things we are investigating. I think it's important to recognize that the health effects of PFAS are becoming widely known, and at the time that it was used were not widely known. The lawsuit alleges that the manufacturers that intentionally added PFAS to the chemical and other products did know that information, and I think that will come out as part of the lawsuit. But in terms of standards, there were no standards for soil sampling or for testing PFAS in development at the time that the training facility was closed. So testing that was done later by the developer we're still looking into, but it was not part of the required testing, and there were no standards or soil sampling protocols at that time for PFAS.
I also want to comment a little bit more on the accumulation. So, you mentioned the cul-de-sac that is there, and there are probably people who have already been playing in the water or exposed to it, and might be worrying about, what is past risk. And again, I would reiterate that that past risk accumulation really happens over time, and so I don't think that folks need to worry too much about if they were playing in that stream over the weekend. But in order to, prevent further exposure, you should try and stay away from that area. Again, the likelihood of absorption of PFAS through the skin is very low. And so if somebody was near the stream in that area, should wash their hands and practice regular hand hygiene. But really the advisory that we are putting in place today is going forward and really trying to reduce any future risk.
Liability, you're involved in some litigation right now, but what if somebody comes forward and says, you've wrecked my property value here?
So the question is about liability, and I think As you noted, there is a lawsuit that the county filed in 2023 against the manufacturers that intentionally added PFAS to firefighting foam and other products. And so I think that court process will play out. Yes.
What about remediation? Is there any talk of that? What would that entail to try to clean up some of these areas?
So the question is, what about remediation and what would that entail? Yes, we are investigating opportunities for remediation. As I mentioned earlier, we formed a task force, and that includes the Maryland Department of Environment, which has already a PFAS action plan in place, and you can find that on the Maryland Department of Environment and Maryland Department of Health websites, to investigate PFAS contamination throughout the state and to look into options for remediation. We will let the investigation and the additional testing guide our next steps as we develop plans for remediation. There are opportunities to remove or contain PFAS contamination. We first need to understand the extent of where the contamination is, particularly related to groundwater and soils.
When it comes to, so I was looking at the map, I know there were clear readings near the Muddy Branch that stretches kind of near the Rio Lake, where a lot of people, take time to lake, and we've heard that obviously prolonged exposure is the thing here. But any thought to maybe having testing more frequently, especially those lakes where we know people may be using them more often?
That's a good question. We can follow up on that. I think, as you mentioned, there are a series of waterways throughout the county, and some of those are intended for, and expected for people to be playing in them and recreating, and some are stormwater ponds that are really intended to slow down the water, which we know has pollution in it from a variety of sources. As it picks up, as the water makes its way into the streams and our rivers and eventually into the Chesapeake Bay. So stormwater ponds serve a purpose to really slow that down and allow some time for filtration. We encourage people not to swim in stormwater ponds, and we have signage that says, no swimming, no skating, no fishing. However, we know that sometimes people still engage in that, and that's why we want to make sure we get the word out about this particular stormwater pond and stream, and we will be putting appropriate additional signage up to make sure that people know not to enter this particular stormwater pond and ponds because of the high levels that we've recently found.
I guess I'll ask one more quick one.
Sure.
So when it comes to, if you've been exposed, say you've lived there for years and you're one of the few houses with a pump and you've been consuming this, and what should you be doing? Should you bring this up to your doctor, that sort of thing? I guess it's more of a...
So I'll turn to Dr. Davis in a moment. The question is, what should you do if you've been living there for years? Should you go to your doctor? I want to start by saying, you mentioned the wells in that question. The private drinking wells within a mile, we are reaching out to the well owners to offer to test those for free. We are not at this time aware of contamination of those wells, so that testing will inform. It is possible that they are up gradient, even part of a different watershed, and may not find contamination from this site. As we have noted, and the Maryland's action plan on PFAS specifically is in place because PFAS is rather ubiquitous in our environment these days because of all of the products that manufacturers have intentionally added it to. And so it is showing up in streams and waterways, aside from this particular acute incident, in other places. And so it is important for private well water owners to be testing for all types of pollutant in their drinking water, at least annually, and also to include PFAS in that testing. Dr. Davis, did you want to elaborate?
So just really speaking to anybody that has a well, should be testing annually for bacteria, pollutants, including PFAS, regardless of whether you're close to this site or not. And as Jennifer mentioned, we'll be helping those folks who may be close to the site if PFAS is found in their well. If PFAS is found, and the MDE and actually has really good guidance on what to do about that, and to place a filtration system at the point of use, so think of a kitchen faucet, either a granulated carbon filter or reverse osmosis are very effective and actually not that expensive in being able to filter out those compounds and other compounds besides PFAS. Again, the risk accumulates over time, and one of the things that is, I think, difficult in this area is that because the science is so new, there are not standards or guidelines around what is a normal level of PFAS in the body. In scientific research that has been done, they have found PFAS in humans, but there is not a correlation between a level of PFAS that is found in a person and a risk or condition. And so again, that's a conversation that folks should be having with their primary care doctor to help understand what their risk might be, looking at them in the context of what other health conditions they might have, in the context of their family history, to help better understand what that looks like.
One last one, 1,600 parts per trillion, how does that compare to other streams, ponds that have been found contaminated around Maryland or the area?
So the question is regarding the 1,600 parts per trillion, how does that compare to other ponds and streams across the state of Maryland?
That have been found contaminated.
That have been found contaminated. We can get back to you on that. I will note that the Maryland Department of Environment is undertaking, under the Maryland Action Plan, a series of sampling across the state, and I don't believe that is completed yet. So I think we will know more when that study is released.
Can I ask one other thing? I'm trying to get a more clear understanding of
Yeah.
the testing in the Muddy Branch area and that pond. Had it been going on for some time before this, and it's only been recently that you've seen this higher level?
So the question is about the sequence of sampling, and had the testing been going on for a long time, and is it just recently that the high level was found? So my understanding of the events are that WSSC, as part of their regular sampling to identify any sources that might be in the upstream watersheds that feed their public drinking water, undertakes screening of various watersheds. And where they find traces or elevated levels, they then ask for additional sampling. And so if you think of it as a little bit of a, it's a source identification, you find a higher spot and then you go further upstream. And that is what they asked Maryland Department of Environment to go further upstream and sample. That's the map here that shows all of these green triangles where they went further upstream, and that's where they found the pond. I don't know if I could ask you, Ms. O'Donnell, to clarify anything about the sampling that you have been undertaking.
Of course. Thank you, Jennifer. I think you laid it out rather well. I think for WSSC water, when the levels are so low at 4 parts per trillion when it comes to drinking water, we want to be being very proactive and doing the most to make sure that we are identifying sources upstream of our intake. So Muddy Branch is roughly 3 miles upstream of our intake, and we wanted to investigate that since it's so close to our intake. This was part of a larger regional effort, too, to study, to understand PFAS concentrations within the Potomac River, since so many people rely on the Potomac River as their drinking water source.
So I'm just wondering if there's a timeline. I'm trying to drill down on how this came to be this elevated level that you've discovered. Are we talking about months, years that this has been going on?
So the question was about the timeline, and I think that's a good question. We will look to identify and the timeline and post that to the website so that you have more information on the specific timeline and kind of pulling the different parts together from WSSC, Maryland Department of the Environment, and our steps going forward.
I was just going to say, if you could specifically follow up about when those samples were taken, that would be helpful.
Okay, we will get those dates. Thank you. I think I don't see hands. I did want to flag one thing. We have a map on the public advisory, and that will be up on our website. And I would encourage you to use the version on our website. But will also be on flyers that are being passed out to the neighboring neighborhoods around the stormwater pond and stream. And we will also be sharing it with the community at our community meeting on Wednesday. I want to reiterate, that's at Dufeef Elementary School in North Potomac on Wednesday, June 17th at 7 p.m. And we appreciate your attention to this matter. The public drinking water is safe, and we are following up an investigation, and we'll be sharing information with you going forward, so you can expect regular updates. Thank you all for your time today.
Can I make a quick comment?
Oh, sure, thank you.
Since some of you have asked the basic question, when did people know? I invite you to do what I just did. Go on Google, look at where the dangers of PFAS hidden, and you'll find evidence going back at least till 1980 of known ill effects of PFAS, particularly even on employees inside some of the companies that were producing them. So as background knowledge, this was all hidden from the FDA. So they didn't know what was going on for years before things started coming out. So people knew it wasn't benign for a long time. They just paid a lot of money.
And I think the county executive's referring to the manufacturers that intentionally added PFAS to firefighting foam as well as other products, and the lawsuit against those manufacturers by Montgomery County as well as by the state of Maryland and other states and counties across the country where that are facing similar situations as we are today. We are going to continue investigating this particular incident around the stormwater pond at Great Seneca Highway in Key West, as well as looking at other areas across the county and with our partnership with the state of Maryland, who's looking across the state of Maryland, and WSSC, who's looking throughout the watershed that they feed from. Thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to continuing updates and conversation with you about this. Thank you.
Connect with some certificate programs and get teamwork involved with that, and just continue to grow and help the young people in Montgomery County with their first jobs and be successful to the community.
Yeah, awesome. We love how we're continuing to focus